helped my girlfriend hide a secret, and it turned me into the villain. The worst mistake of my life started with a knock on my apartment door at 2:17 a.m. I remember the time because I was still awake, staring at my phone, wondering why my girlfriend wasn't answering. We had argued earlier that night. Nothing explosive, just one of those tense conversations about where this is going and why do you always shut down. She had stormed out saying she needed air. When I opened the door, she was standing there barefoot, mascara running down her face, hoodie covered in dirt. Not crying, not hysterical, just empty. The first thing she said was, "I need you to say I've been here all night." No hello, no explanation, just that. I laughed at first because I thought it was a joke. It wasn't. She walked past me into the apartment like she already owned the place, started washing her hands in my sink like she was trying to scrub something invisible off her skin. I asked what happened. She said she couldn't tell me yet. That if I loved her, I'd trust her. That was complicated and not what it looks like. That sentence, not what it looks like, does something to your brain. It plants 1,000 images at once. I asked if she cheated. She snapped at me, told me I always assumed the worst. Told me this is why she can't talk to me about serious things. Somehow within 3 minutes, I was apologizing. That's how it always worked with us. I'd start with questions. She'd end with control. Then she said her sister might call. Or maybe her mom. And if they did, I had to say she'd been with me since 9 p.m. watching movies. Eating takeout. Fell asleep early. She made me repeat the story back to her, like I was rehearsing for court. That's when I noticed her hands were still shaking. I asked again what this was about. She finally gave me something. Said she'd gone to confront someone about a rumor that could ruin her job. Said things got heated. Said people exaggerate. Said she didn't do anything wrong, but people might twist it. That should have been my red flag. But here's the thing about loving someone who feels slightly out of your league. You spend most of your time trying not to lose them. Alina was confident, magnetic, the kind of woman who walked into a room and owned it. I was steady, predictable, safe. She knew that. And in that moment, she leaned into it. She sat on my couch, looked up at me with those exhausted eyes, and said, "You're the only person I can trust." I didn't feel chosen. I felt trapped. My phone buzzed 5 minutes later. Unknown number. I answered. A male voice asked, "Is Alina with you right now?" And that's when I realized this wasn't about a rumor. This was about something much bigger. Part 2. My heart stopped for a second. I fumbled with my phone, tried to keep my voice calm. "Who is this?" I asked. The voice was cold, clipped. I just need to know she's safe. That's all. I swallowed hard, looking at Alina. She was lying on the couch now, arms wrapped around herself, eyes half closed, pretending to nap. Pretending. I realized she wasn't even breathing normally. Every small movement was calculated, like she was performing for me and the phone. I told the man, "Yes, she's here," my voice barely above a whisper. He asked a few more questions, something about a location I didn't understand, and hung up. My hand was shaking. Alina opened her eyes and smiled that small, tired smile that made me feel like I'd just done something terrible without knowing why. I asked, "Who was that?" She said, casually, "Just someone I had to handle." They were worried. You don't need to know everything. I wanted to push to ask why I was the only one being dragged into the secret, but instead I nodded. I always nodded. I had been nodding for weeks in this relationship whenever she said, "Trust me." The night stretched longer. She made me sit next to her while she told me fragments that made no sense. "It's work. It's personal. It's not what you think." Then she reached out, took my hand, and whispered, "I only tell you because I trust you." I squeezed her hand. I wanted to feel proud, honored, like I was part of something important. Instead, I felt small, complicit. By 5 a.m., she finally fell asleep. I stayed on the couch, staring at the ceiling, trying to untangle the little puzzle pieces she'd thrown at me. None of them fit. And then my phone vibrated again. Another unknown number. This one texted, "You're in too deep now." I froze. My stomach dropped. I looked at Alina, peaceful, pretending to sleep. And I realized I had just stepped into something I didn't understand. Something dangerous. I didn't know then that every choice I'd make over the next week would pull me further into her world. A world I wasn't ready for. And yet, somehow, I couldn't step out. The next morning, I woke to the smell of coffee and silence. Alina was in the kitchen, humming softly, her hair tied back in a messy bun. She smiled when she saw me, like nothing had happened, like the strange calls, the shadows in her apartment, and the mysterious texts didn't exist. I wanted to scream at her, demand answers, but instead I poured myself some coffee and tried to act normal. She leaned against the counter, her eyes studying me carefully. "You didn't sleep well," she said. I forced a laugh. "Just a rough night." She tilted her head, a small smirk forming. "Rough nights make mornings sweeter, don't they?" I didn't reply. I couldn't. I remember the text, the unknown voice, and the gnawing feeling that I was already trapped. Hours later, she dragged me out for a walk, holding my hand tightly. Her touch was warm, comforting, the kind of thing that made me want to forget everything. But every step we took, I noticed the way she kept glancing over her shoulder, checking the street, watching for someone or something. Finally, we stopped at a small park. She sat on a bench and motioned for me to sit next to her. "You're asking too many questions," she said softly. "I'm not asking enough." I shot back. "I don't know who I'm with anymore." Her smile faded. She reached out, brushing a strand of hair from my face. "It's complicated. More complicated than you can understand." I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to storm off, leave, run as far as I could from her tangled life. But then she looked at me, eyes wide, almost pleading, and I froze. She whispered, "I can't lose you. Not now." I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. But deep down, I knew that believing her meant ignoring the warning signs, ignoring the fear crawling up my spine. And that's when I noticed a man standing across the park, leaning against a tree, watching us. He was tall, his face shadowed by a cap. My heart sank. Alina saw him too. She stiffened and whispered, "Don't move." The man turned and walked away, but the threat was clear. Someone was following her, or maybe following us. And I had no idea why. As we walked back to her apartment, silence stretched between us, heavy and suffocating. Every laugh, every touch felt like a lie. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, imagining every possible scenario. Who were the men on the phone? Why did she trust them more than me? And why, despite it all, did I still want her, still need her beside me? By dawn, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't just falling for her. I was falling into her world, a world I might never escape from. The next day, Alina was quieter than usual. She didn't make coffee, didn't hum, didn't smile. I watched her from the couch, pretending to read, but my eyes followed her every move. The air between us was thick, loaded with unspoken words and secrets I wasn't supposed to know. Finally, she spoke. I have to go out. Alone. Her voice was calm, but her hands trembled slightly as she grabbed her coat. Alone. I echoed. After yesterday? You can't just walk around like nothing happened. She ignored me. Her eyes were fixed on the floor, and I realized she was trying to shield me from what I didn't know. I wanted to follow her, demand answers, but something in her posture told me that chasing her would only make things worse. Hours passed, and I waited, every minute stretching like an eternity. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You shouldn't have gotten involved. Panic surged through me. I tried calling Alina, but she didn't pick up. I raced outside, checking every street, every corner, but she was gone. And so was the man who had been watching us in the park. When she finally returned, night had fallen. She looked exhausted, and her coat was torn at the sleeve. I wanted to ask, to scream, to demand an explanation, but she collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. I didn't want you to see, she whispered. I didn't want you to know. Know what? I pressed, my voice cracking. Alina, what's happening? Who are these people? She lifted her head, eyes wet, filled with a mix of fear and desperation. I can't tell you everything. Not yet. But they're dangerous. They don't just follow me. They follow anyone who gets close. My heart thumped violently. Why me? Why are you pulling me into this? She didn't answer. Instead, she moved closer, gripping my hands. Because I can't do it alone. And I can't let you leave. Not now. Her words should have terrified me. And they did. But the way she looked at me, so vulnerable and real, made me hesitate. Made me want to stay. That night, sleep refused me again. Every shadow in the room felt alive. Every sound outside her apartment like a warning. And when I thought I could finally close my eyes, my phone vibrated again. Another message from the same unknown number. You'll regret staying. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. Someone wanted to scare me off, or worse. And I realized that staying with her wasn't just risky. It might be lethal. I turned to look at Alina, asleep now, her face peaceful for the first time in days. And I knew one truth I couldn't ignore. I had chosen to dive into a world of danger, secrets, and lies, and there was no turning back. The next morning, Alina was already gone when I woke. Her apartment smelled faintly of coffee and smoke, but she wasn't there. On the kitchen counter, a note in her hurried handwriting. I had to leave. Don't follow me. Trust me. Trust her? My instincts screamed at me to run after her, to demand answers. But something told me that chasing would only put me in the crosshairs of whatever she was tangled in. I grabbed my coat and keys, determined to at least find out where she had gone. Outside, the city seemed different, sharper somehow. Shadows lingered where they shouldn't, and every passerby felt like a potential threat. I pulled out my phone to call her, but no signal. Nothing. Panic churned in my chest. Hours later, I got a text from her. Meet me at the old pier. Midnight. Come alone. Midnight. Alone. Every nerve in my body screamed that this was a trap, but I couldn't stop myself. I needed answers, even if it meant risking everything. I arrived early, pacing along the docks. The fog rolled in, thick and suffocating, and the water lapped against the pier like a warning. And then I saw her, Alina, standing at the edge, back to me, hands in her pockets, staring out at the dark water. Alina, I called softly. She didn't turn. Please, explain. I can't just not know. Finally, she turned, and the look on her face made my stomach twist. Fear, anger, and desperation tangled together. I want to tell you, she said, voice shaking, but you're already in too deep. If you stay with me now, you might not come back. What are you talking about? I demanded. She took a deep breath, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath with us. There's someone who doesn't forgive, doesn't forget. They've been following me for years. My ex, he's dangerous. He doesn't just hurt me. He destroys anyone I care about. I felt my heart drop. Ex. That explains everything. Her eyes glistened. Yes, he knows about you now. He knows you're involved. And he won't stop until one of us is gone. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. And in that moment, I understood whatever I had signed up for by staying with her wasn't just emotional chaos. It was real danger. Then, from the fog behind me, I heard a footstep. One. Soft. Deliberate. And I realized, too late, that we weren't alone. Alina grabbed my hand, squeezing tightly. Run, she whispered. Run and hide. Trust me. But I couldn't move. My eyes were fixed on the shadow that emerged from the mist, tall, unyielding, watching. And I knew, in that heartbeat, that nothing would ever be the same again. The shadow moved closer, slow and deliberate, each step echoing on the wooden pier like a drumbeat in my chest. I finally tore my gaze away from it and looked at Alina. Her face pale, eyes wide, but she held my hand like it was the only lifeline left in the world. Go, she hissed. There's a narrow alley behind the warehouse. We can lose him there. I nodded, adrenaline surging, and we ran. The fog swallowed us, and for a moment I thought we'd vanished, but then I heard it. Heavy breathing, a voice muttering something I couldn't catch, and the unmistakable sound of footsteps splitting after us. We darted into the alley, knocking over crates, slipping on wet pavement. My heart raced so fast, I thought it would burst. Alina glanced at me, panic and determination colliding in her gaze. If he catches us, she whispered, we're done. There's no coming back from him. Somehow, we made it to the end, bursting out onto an abandoned street, lit only by a flickering street lamp. We paused to catch our breath, pressed against a brick wall, and I realized for the first time that the fear in her eyes wasn't just about me. It was the kind of fear that comes from living under someone else's control for years. Who is he, Alina? I demanded. Why hasn't anyone stopped him? She shook her head. He's not like anyone you've ever met. Rich, powerful, obsessive. He doesn't care about law or consequences. And he's already destroyed people who've tried to interfere. I didn't want you involved. I really didn't. A sudden noise, a metallic clang, made both of us jump. The shadow had found us. We bolted again, twisting through alleys, my lungs burning, the night stretching into a maze with no end. Every corner we turned felt like a trap, every shadow a potential death sentence. Finally, Alina pulled me into an old building, slamming the door behind us. Dust motes danced in the weak light, and silence pressed down so hard I could hear my own heartbeat echoing off the walls. She leaned against the door, trembling. "He's gonna find us," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "And when he does," I put my hand on her shoulder, gripping it tight. "Then we fight," I said, though my voice betrayed how terrified I actually was. Alina's eyes met mine, haunted, raw, but there was something else there too. Trust, desperation, and the faintest flicker of hope. "We might not make it," she admitted. "But if we don't try, we'll never know if we could survive together." I realized then that being with her wasn't just about love anymore. It was about survival, choices, and the unbearable weight of secrets that had finally caught up with us. And deep down, I knew the night wasn't over. Not by a long shot. We stayed in that abandoned building for what felt like hours, crouched in corners, listening to the night. Every sound outside, the scraping of metal, the whisper of wind, the distant bark of a dog, made us jump. Alina's hands shook as she fumbled with her phone, but the screen was dead. No signal, no help, nothing. "I didn't want this to happen," she muttered, voice trembling. I thought leaving him behind would be enough. I looked at her, the weight of her confession settling on my chest. "Then why didn't you leave sooner?" I asked. "Why didn't anyone stop him?" She swallowed hard. "Because I tried, and he destroyed everything I loved. My job, my friends, my family. He made me feel like I was nothing without him. That's why I didn't tell anyone. I couldn't risk anyone else getting hurt." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I just wanted to hold her, to tell her everything would be okay. But the truth hit me like a punch in the gut. Everything was far from okay. We were trapped in the middle of a storm we didn't understand, and running wasn't even an option anymore. Then we heard it. A car door slamming outside. My stomach dropped. "He's here," I whispered. Alina grabbed my arm. "No, he can't." But the windows rattled, and shadows stretched across the walls. I could see the silhouette of a tall figure moving around the building. His presence filled the space like a physical force, cold and menacing. "We need another exit," I said, voice low but urgent. She nodded, pointing toward a back corridor. We moved silently, careful not to make a sound, each step echoing like a warning. Every sense in my body screamed danger. And then, from the darkness, a voice called my name, soft, cruel, and unmistakable. "Don't think you can hide from me," it said. I froze. Alina pressed herself against me, whispering, "I warned you." We kept moving, hearts hammering, and I realized that night had changed us. Love and fear had merged into something raw and violent. I didn't know if we'd survive him, but one thing was clear: nothing would ever be the same. By the time we found a narrow fire escape leading up to the roof, the first light of dawn was touching the city. I looked at Alina, exhausted, terrified, but alive, and for a fleeting moment, hope flickered. But even as we climbed, I knew the danger wasn't over. He would follow. He always did. And the thought of him finding us, it was unbearable. I never thought that a single message could destroy everything we had built. He came home later than usual, and I noticed his phone vibrating on the table. My heart sank. I knew he was hiding something. I picked it up, looked at the screen, and saw a chain of messages with another woman. Soft, intimate, as if he was telling her things he had never told me. My hands were shaking. I wanted to scream, but the words got stuck in my throat. He noticed my face and snatched the phone away, his eyes full of horror and confusion. He tried to explain that it was just a silly conversation, that I was more important to him, that it didn't mean anything. But every phrase he said only made the pain worse. I could hear it in his tone, as if he had already shared his thoughts and feelings with someone else. We yelled at each other, accusations flying like stones. He talked about stress, about work, about how I didn't understand his exhaustion. I yelled about betrayal, about lies, about trust being broken. And in the middle of this chaos, I realized we were no longer the people we used to be, that a wall had grown between us that couldn't be moved. I went outside, hugging myself, trying to calm down. My heart was breaking, my eyes burning with tears. I remembered all the moments when he was there, when we laughed together, when it seemed like love was stronger than anything. And suddenly I was scared that it could all disappear, not because of the pain, but because we had allowed doubts and secrets to grow so huge. At night, I lay in the dark, listening to him sleep quietly in the other room, and for the first time, I felt real emptiness. The understanding that sometimes love doesn't save you if trust is broken pressed on me with every second. I didn't know if I would wake up tomorrow and want to see him the same way, or if this would be the end that we both felt but were afraid to admit. The next morning felt heavy, as if the air itself was holding its breath. I stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every word, every accusation, every small smile we had shared that now seemed like a distant memory. I wasn't sure if I wanted to forgive him, or if forgiveness even mattered anymore. He knocked softly on the door, his voice shaky. I could hear the guilt, the regret, the raw need to fix something that might be unfixable. He told me he understood if I couldn't trust him again, that he would give me all the time I needed, that he'd do whatever it took to prove that I was still the most important part of his life. But I realized then that love alone couldn't rebuild the walls we had built around ourselves, that words without action meant nothing. Hours passed. We walked in silence through the apartment, touching lightly, each afraid to break the fragile peace. And then I saw it. A small note he left on the table. Not an apology, but a promise. A list of actions, little things to rebuild trust, to show me that he remembered the person I was when we first fell in love. I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in days. Hope, yes, but cautious, careful, fragile. We sat down together, talking slowly, honestly, without yelling. For the first time in weeks, I saw him listening, really listening, and I let myself speak the truths I'd been holding inside. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't fixed. There were no guarantees that the hurt would disappear. But for the first time, I felt like we were moving in the same direction, even if the path was uncertain. That night, as I fell asleep, I realized that sometimes love isn't enough to erase mistakes, but can give you a reason to try again. And maybe, just maybe, the cracks in our hearts could become something stronger, something we built together instead of tearing apart. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like we had a chance. Not because trust had been fully restored, but because we were willing to fight for it anyway.